Hello everyone. I'm going to do today what I did yesterday, and rather than take a whole service of morning prayer, just to take one of the readings set for morning prayer and then to say a few words about it, hoping that they'll be helpful. So for today, our reading comes from the book of Exodus. It's the very end of chapter 2 and the first part of chapter 3, and it's essentially about Moses and the burning bush. It's a story I think that we probably all know pretty well, but it won't hurt us to hear it again with it. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Out of the slavery, their cry for help rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." And then he said, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said further, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He said, "I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain." But Moses said to God, "If I come to the Israelites to say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said further, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations. Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, "The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have given heed to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. I declare that I will bring you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to your voice. And you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, "The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us now go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. I know, however, that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will perform in it. After that, he will let you go. Here ends our reading. If you're a stickler for detail, you may have noticed my unforced error in my offering yesterday. I told you, and I believed it, that I had chosen one of the readings set down for Monday. In fact, I had slipped a line on the lectionary. It was a reading for Mothering Sunday morning prayer. But I had no regrets. I found it a helpful reading. There is so much comfort in the second section of the book of Isaiah. In fact, the section actually begins with the word comfort. Comfort my people, says God. That's the sort of God he is. In our reading from Exodus this morning, comfort for his people is on God's mind again. Isaiah is prophesying about the distress of the Hebrews who've been in exile in Babylon for at least a generation as a result of a disastrous military and political defeat. Now, our reading today goes back to the earlier story of the Hebrews. They've been in Egypt for hundreds of years, initially brought there by Joseph to escape famine in their own land of Canaan. There, having multiplied and prospered in Egypt, the indigenous Egyptians start to see them as a threat because the Hebrews now heavily outnumber them. Somehow, they manage to enslave them and make them do the heavy work a powerful kingdom needs doing, like civil engineering or farming or other things like that. The treatment of the slaves becomes increasingly cruel and oppressive, and their life becomes intolerable. They urgently need a saviour. And their saviour will be God himself through the agency of Moses. But Moses doesn't know that yet. That's what this episode is all about. I chose this reading, and it really is the reading for today, because like yesterday's wrongly chosen one, it seems to speak to us in our current plight. We may not be in slavery, but we are oppressed, I think, by an unseen foe, which, if I understand biology a little bit, seems to need to survive by making us ill as it multiplies inside our bodies, as the Hebrews did in Egypt. Please excuse me if I've got that wrong. 3 elements of the reading stand out for me. Won't John be pleased? The first is the way in which God first spoke to Moses. Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. You do wonder, don't you, whether this is actually the way it happened? Whether it is or whether it isn't, it's not how God would speak to any of us today. He would never say, come no closer. He would never tell us to take our shoes off, or our hats off for that matter, or to tell the ladies to put their hats on. He simply isn't interested in such petty stuff. He's interested in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls. And he's not dispassionately interested either, watching us as a scientist might watch microbes in a petri dish. He watches us with profound affection, as a parent watches their child at play or as they learn. Because, as we read yesterday, we are his. He loves us. We are his children. He's much more likely to say to us, come closer to me, so that I may comfort you. Because when you hurt, I hurt. I don't believe God suddenly became a more loving God over time. I am. That is his name. He is, throughout all ages, the same. My second point is that God has seen the suffering of the Hebrew slaves. Today, he sees the suffering of his beloved children, fearful of the coronavirus, or afflicted by it, or bereaved by it, and he wants to help. You might ask why it took him so long in the case of the Hebrews, and I can't answer that. God seems not to do things with the same urgency that we feel he should. Time is different for him. Perhaps he waits to see whether we can sort things out for ourselves. The Hebrews evidently couldn't. Perhaps we can sort out COVID-19 with our advanced scientific and medical skills on our own. But there's every reason to pray to God to inspire and encourage our experts, our frontline workers, and our government. They can be his agents, as Moses was to be. My last point, Moses asks God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" Moses felt totally unworthy. An exiled foster child and now a mere farmer and family man with a speech impediment. No one special. Surely many of us, if not most of us, have said similar things of ourselves. I'm no one special. Well, we aren't, and we are. So many people are responding to this crisis by thinking what they can do to help their neighbours. There are lovely stories in the papers and on the web, aren't there? Through listening to God, we can be inspired to do his work in our community. Some of us, those less at risk, can get out and give practical support to those who are confined to their homes. Others, adept at communicating, whether by phone or Skype or FaceTime, or by sending a kind and encouraging email, can bring comfort to those who are feeling rather isolated. I'm finding that these things, often very simple, are enormously appreciated. And when we lack the confidence to begin such efforts, God says, "I will be with you." And then we become special because we are doing God's work. God is with me now as I speak to you and as I wrote this, because without him, I'd just be mouthing meaningless twaddle. I pray that I am being true to him in what I say and true to the gospel of Jesus. And I send this with love from the whole team at St. Mark's and a longing to see you all again before too long. God bless you. Goodbye.